All right, everyone. Welcome to the session here. This is Rosie Cunningham. She's a developer advocate from Dropbox. Very excited to give her presentation, everyone. She'll answer questions at the end, I'm sure, or she'll let you know everything. So take it away, Rosie. Nice to have you. Good luck.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. One sec.
There it
Sorry.
goes. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Good
Awesome.
luck.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I hope you are having a lovely day. My name is Rosie Cunningham. I am a developer evangelist at Dropbox, and I am very excited to present to you today on harnessing OpenAPI to provide a better developer experience. At the end of this presentation, I want you to walk away with a better understanding of what is possible with OpenAPI and how using OpenAPI can benefit you and your customers. Sorry, one second. Over the next 20 or so minutes, I'll spend time discussing the problems we were facing with our own tech stack and what motivated us to invest in transforming our developer experience, how writing our own OpenAPI spec drove positive changes to the developer experience while simultaneously improving the lives of our API engineers, and finally, a demo of one of the new services that came out of this project. Before we dive in, I want to share some big news around our rebrand. As you can see, the company formerly known as HelloSign is now Dropbox Sign and is now even more integrated into Dropbox's content platform. Across Dropbox's rich suite of consumer and business solutions, we have one goal that we're always striving to achieve, and that's being obsessed with usability and ensuring things just work for our customers. When it comes to the Sign API, that central goal is embodied in our developer experience. Our developer-friendly API enables companies to build and launch eSign within their apps in hours, not weeks, through our embedded and non-embedded workflows. Our customers implement Sign API to power a number of use cases, such as designing apps that can let users buy and sell homes, onboard new employees, and speed up recruitment pipelines. Here are some examples of where you may have seen our API in the wild. First, we have Greenhouse, which is a provider of HR and onboarding software. They use our API to provide their candidates with a seamless and digital onboarding experience. They leverage features we offer, such as premium branding, to comprehensively mirror Greenhouse's look and feel from the very first touch point. We also have WAG, which is adorable, and also is a pet care platform. And they use our API to really tackle some of their burdensome admin tasks that they were getting dragged down with, such as managing signups, contracts, renewals, and they can also use the integration they built with our API to activate pet caregivers from anywhere. So as the name of this talk alludes to, OpenAPI was our solution to a problem. And we can't really address the solution without first kind of laying the groundwork for the problem. And in short, our developer experience was a little bit of a problem. We all know what a bad developer experience looks like and feels like, something where usability just clearly is not in focus. Before we wrote our own OpenAPI spec, we didn't really follow a set standard when it came to writing our SDKs. Both our SDKs and the related documentation had to be updated through extensively manual processes, and they were becoming really difficult to maintain. And as a result, they both fell out of sync with our API. We were being plagued by common problems of API creators. And so we knew that we needed to buckle down on the decision to pause feature work in lieu of creating a more sustainable investment into our API. So in considering what we should use to publish, we had a few fundamental requirements. The first, that it was a language agnostic solution. The second, that we would have the assurance around quality that comes from a format that is readable by machines and humans. Automation was a huge goal in mind. And also we just wanted beautiful interactive docs that would delight our users' experience. And we landed on these requirements because we really wanted developers to enjoy building with our API. And we wanted them to be able to go to market faster with their apps. But on top of improving our users' experience, we also had our engineering team's needs in the back of our minds as well. In our dispersed workforce, we needed a standard that would make it easier to collaborate on design while also enabling some autonomy and independence within our team. And we also wanted to free up resources through automatic code generation, and we needed a safer way to update our SDKs and documentation. And so eventually, after researching different options, we landed on OpenAPI, and then a little bit later, Redocly, which is a documentation tool that is equally focused on improving the lives of developers and is also compatible with OAS standards. So I've tossed around OAS, OpenAPI a little bit. If anyone isn't familiar, it is a specification that is maintained by the OpenAPI initiative, and it refers to RESTful API design. And really what it does is it just helps you simplify and standardize the way that APIs are written. An OpenAPI file allows you to describe your entire API, including available endpoints and operations on each endpoint, operation parameters, authentication methods, and contact information. API specs can be written in YAML or JSON, and they're super easy to learn and machine readable. And so this kind of ticked all of our boxes and those fundamental requirements that I mentioned before. And yeah, just a little bit about the architecture of everything and how we put everything together. Once we came to our OpenAPI spec, we were able to use that to power 6 new beta SDKs for our API and then also new documentation. And here's how we did it. So starting from our API, we used a library called Swagger PHP to write a series of annotations on top of our API. And that structure allowed us to manage all of the content of our API reference in a public repo and move it out of this like really dense monolithic repo and code base that wasn't just secluded to our API and made authoring by multiple people a little bit difficult because of that. And so from our public repo, we have a build script and pulls in the content to generate our SDKs and docs, and the related processes of that are fully automated. And the automation in and of itself is just a huge gain that came from adopting OpenAPI. And we control the reference section of our documentation with our OpenAPI spec. And the OpenAPI repo is what holds all of the copy and code examples. And this is what the repo is called. It's public, so definitely encourage everyone to check it out. And since we are able to host all of this in a public repo, that kind of solved the problem that I just referred to of having authoring kind of locked down to a few number of people. And this opened up authoring to basically anyone that can submit a PR. And that expansion of ownership and collaboration proved to be a consistent theme throughout this process, and it led to huge gains internally and externally. And something really cool and slick about this to highlight here is that the PR for the OpenAPI spec creates preview builds and documentation for the SDKs. And in that process runs integration tests and returns a report, which has been incredibly useful for debugging and ensuring that we are releasing stable updates. All right, so now on to how this relates to our new SDKs. So we use our OpenAPI spec to generate a YAML file, and that describes our API. This takes all of our existing endpoints and defines a schema for each, and that each schema includes each endpoint's accepted parameters and allowed methods, along with a summary and full description of the endpoint and its properties. And here is an example of how we define the signature request send endpoint, which is the endpoint that generates a non-embedded signature request using our API. So first, we define the path for the endpoint, and then we specify that it's a post type. And this is followed by the summary and description of the endpoint. From there, we reference the schema along with the accepted request parameters. The schema contains the accepted request parameters. The schema is referenced here and then defined in a separate location. It's a little bit difficult to see, I'm sure, but this is what the schema looks like. And here you would just be able to reference all of the required request parameters and properties associated with the signature request object, which is the object related to this endpoint. All right, and so after all of that work, what was our outcome? We saw a pretty astounding reaction from our users and their ability to activate even faster. And when I say activate, I'm referring to a metric that we defined that essentially measures the time between when an account is registered in our system and when it makes its first successful API call. And in the first few months, we saw some pretty awesome results from this work once we launched. So we saw a 43% decrease in how long it took new users to activate. And then on top of that, we saw a 40% increase in successful signature requests in test mode over a 30-day window following our launch. And then to top that off, we saw upwards of 10,000 first-time API calls right from the testing console within our new docs. And so what this showed us was that users were spending way less time figuring out how to get started and send their first signature request, and they had a much shorter timeline to actually launching their applications and moving into production. So what specifically changed for our developers to lead to such a positive outcome? We adopted a Docs as code approach. We are better positioned to share ownership of these repos more broadly, which gave our organization the ability to have users or people within our organization that talk directly to customers. They were able to author documentation now, which is pretty phenomenal and kind of what the ideal developer experience would be, in that we're able to very quickly mirror what our customers are telling us they want and need in these docs, and we can actually have the people that hear that feedback make those updates for them. So it's been pretty powerful, and we were able to create more accountability with our customer feedback loop. With freer resources and less risk around updating our API resources, we are becoming faster and better equipped to reach the needs of our customers and really just meet developers where they are at. And one of my favorite parts of this, and even just putting this presentation together, is that we started out with this goal that was very externally focused. We wanted to improve our developer experience. We wanted our customers to have a delightful time using our product and these services that help them do so. And some kind of like a unexpected positive outcome from this was kind of these positive effects that it had on our internal teams as well. So not only did we meet our goals to better serve our customers, we also created these great improvements for the lives of our API engineers. As I mentioned before, prior to OpenAPI, we offered 6 SDKs, and updates to those SDKs and related documentation were super manual. They had to be completed separately. It was a lot of maintenance. And OpenAPI radically helped us change this, since for the most part, some minor changes can be simplified down to just updating a YAML file. And this effectively eliminates the issue we saw before with these resources getting out of sync. And with this automation that was introduced by OpenAPI, our documentation and SDKs will consistently stay in lockstep with our API. This is not only a huge win for reliability, but it frees up engineering resources that had previously been allocated to maintenance. And so now our team has that additional bandwidth back to build more and to continue to improve our product for our users. And what's more, since all of our SDKs are now automatically built and always synchronized with our API itself and with each other, we've been able to have non-engineers testing and finding bugs in these SDKs much faster than before. By adopting OpenAPI standards, our team is no longer running into the issues commonly experienced by growing teams. We now have a set standard and a source of truth for our API and documentation. And as our team becomes more distributed, this becomes extremely valuable. All right, so for our demo, I'll be showing you how easy it is to make a live call from our documentation. This endpoint uses this demo rather, uses the endpoint that I dug into a little bit when discussing the schema and the SDK work related to our OpenAPI spec. I had some issues sharing this during the test run, so hopefully this goes well. I'm gonna have to do some window minimizing. Let me see. All right. Can I get some sort of feedback in the chat as to whether, oh, I don't think I'm sharing my screen anymore. Oh, no, I was. Okay. Let's see. All right, we should be able to see this video now. Yes, okay, cool. I will go ahead and get started with this demo then. So what we're looking at now is the surface of our documentation. This is created from Redocly. And so something really great about this is that it's searchable. Our documentation prior to this was not, and so that in and of itself is a pretty big win. Right here, we have a list of the different objects that you can be working with. Right here, we're zeroing in on our signature request object. The way that these pages are structured is they have just some helpful information that you need to know when working with this object, as well as available endpoints. And then here, since we are zooming in on the send signature requests or signature request send endpoint, we're clicking into here and we can see a list of all of the available request parameters and all of the data types for each request parameter as well, which is extremely helpful. And then at the very bottom, we'll see the responses and just an idea of what that payload will look like either way, as well, along with what the actual possible responses are. Here we can see the shape of that payload as well. And the same goes for the request samples as well. So this Try It console, which is one of the very useful tools that came out of this project, and this is the surface or the part of this surface that we saw that upwards of 12,000 organic calls come from after launching. So right here, I did a little bit of prep before I updated the body to include my signer's email address, and I updated the title as well. In its current form, the Try It console does require that you insert your API key. So this is me doing that. It's already been rotated in case this raises any eyebrows in terms of security. But yeah, we just went ahead and sent that and made a live API call in test mode from our documentation. See, I get a status saying that it was okay. And since it was a successful request and this is a non-embedded signature request, I should be seeing a email with the document that I just created through this API call arrive in this inbox shortly. There it is. All right, and right here, I am just opening the signature request up and going through the signature request process flow. Since it was in test mode, that's what that modal stating that it's not legally binding is for, but obviously in production it would be. And right now, I'm just able to kind of move through the signature request process as I would as a signer. And this is just a phenomenal improvement on the getting started and just kind of that workflow of a brand new developer. Because prior to that, like really all they had to do, or all I had to do for this demo was generate an API key. Everything else was done for me, and I was able to take all of the other testing right from the documentation, which is pretty awesome. So let me go ahead and reshare my screen so I can jump back into my presentation. Awesome. All right, so as our time today comes to an end, if there's anything you should take away, it's these 3 points. Everyone stands to gain from an investment in developer experience, including the customer and your teams that support it. Open API standard is the optimal way to go because design can be collaborative and it supports democratized ownership over important resources. An open API allows you to innovate with how users discover, experiment with, and ultimately adopt your API, and being able to transform that journey is really exciting and rewarding. All right. So a huge thank you to API World for having us. This is, I think, our second year at the conference. Last week was our first time in person, and being able to do it again virtually this week has been equally as fun. So I hope everyone comes and visits our virtual booth. I'll be answering any questions that you may have about anything in this presentation there. You can also just come to have a chat. I would love to hear about anything you're building or really just get to know people. I've been having so much fun meeting everyone. So hopefully we can continue there. And yeah, thank you so much.